everyone, it's Thursday again, and that means that it's time for your free consult. And today is going to be a really interesting session. I'm going to talk about the 10 things that your OBGYN is going to ask you. This is going to be an interesting one. So the first and most obvious thing that your OBGYN is going to ask you is your age. And the reason that's important is because we need to know what that means in terms of your menstrual history, in terms of your fertility. If you're much older, for example, and you have a fertility problem, then it makes sense because after a certain age, fertility really decreases. And if you're much younger and you have menstrual irregularities, then that makes sense as well because that happens when you're younger. So age is the first question you're going to be asked. Another thing your OBGYN is going to ask you is your last menstrual period. And that's usually the first day of your last menstrual period. Now, I know most of you usually have an app, and that's a great thing because it makes a lot of sense for you to just, whip out your app and tell your OBGYN when your last menstrual period was, as opposed to, I can't remember. All right, so the last menstrual period, because that makes me know, is there a possibility that you could be pregnant, or is your period just fairly regular and everything is going on okay? And with your last menstrual period, another thing that you may be asked is your parity, meaning how many children do you have, or how many pregnancies have you had that were successful or ended up in miscarriages or terminations or a stillbirth. That's very important to your OBGYN in terms of your past obstetric history. Another question your OBGYN might ask you is about the regularity of your periods. How regular are they? What's your cycle length? How long do they last? Are they fairly painful or not? These are some of the menstrual questions that you may be asked by your OBGYN. The next thing you may be asked by your OBGYN is whether you've ever had a pap smear. And for me, that's usually a very important question. I'm very passionate about women doing their pap smears. So I'm likely to ask you when you've done your last pap smear, whether it was normal or not, what the results were. And I probably will ask you to give me a copy of that result in any form so that I can assure you that it's actually normal, especially if I'm not the one who actually did it. The next thing you might be asked is about contraception. And this is about what contraceptives you've taken previously, what contraceptives you're taking currently, and what effects they've had on you. And how long did you use those contraceptives? Because we need to know whether you may be having an effect of a contraceptive right now on your current situation. For example, if you recently had a hormonal implant and you still haven't had your period, then that makes perfect sense because occasionally hormonal contraception can make you miss your period, especially progesterone-based contraception. So your doctor is gonna want to know your contraceptive history. Another thing that your OBGYN might ask you, and this one is a little bit tricky, is about your sexual history. So many times people don't want to answer this honestly, but I just really want to encourage you to please answer this honestly to your OBGYN. We want to know how many sexual partners have you had, were you using contraception with these partners, were you using condoms with these partners. This is really important to us because we need to know what are the probabilities that you have a sexually transmitted infection, especially if you come with symptoms like infertility or symptoms like severe pelvic pain that's been chronic. We really need to know your sexual history. It's a tricky one, but please be honest. The next two questions you'll be asked by your OBGYN is about your medical and your family history. What's your medical history like? Have you ever had any particular disease that was there for a long time? Do you currently have a chronic medical illness? That's very important to your OBGYN because that really makes us understand why you're having a particular reproductive health problem right now. So I need to know, are you diabetic? Are you hypertensive? Is there a bleeding disorder in your family? Do you have a family history of breast cancer, cervical cancer? So your medical history is one of the very important questions that your OBGYN will ask you. The next thing that you might be asked is about your obstetric history. And this is just about your previous pregnancies and deliveries. Whether they were pregnancies that went to term, whether they were pregnancies that didn't make it to term, we need to know about them. We need to know how long was your labor. Was it a difficult labor? Did you have an episiotomy, for example? Was it a cesarean section? Was it a vaginal delivery? During your pregnancies, did you face any complications? For example, did you have high blood pressure? Were you diabetic in any of your pregnancies? This is very, very important information to your OBGYN because this makes me understand what are the likelihoods that you have the same problems in this particular pregnancy if you're pregnant currently. So your obstetric history is definitely one of the questions you'll be asked. Last but not least, your OBGYN will ask you about your social history. And this usually means, do you take alcohol? Do you take drugs? Do you smoke? And this is really important to your OBGYN because Smoking, drinking, taking drugs, all these do affect your reproductive health. You could be having a difficulty in conceiving, and it could be because of one of these social habits. So your social history is something that, again, you should be very honest about, but it's something that your OBGYN will want to get into. So now that you know the 10 probable questions that your OBGYN is going to ask you, I hope this makes your experience much more pleasurable at your OBGYN. I hope it makes you more confident, more honest, and more secure in your consult. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and see you next Thursday.